The threat arrived on October 1st, the day we moved in, carried on the crisp autumn air by a woman whose smile was a ruler straight line of polite hostility. Her name was Diane Parker. She materialized at the edge of our new lawn on 847 Maple Grove Circle, as Amanda and I were directing the landscapers. They were carefully lowering the root ball of a young crepe myrtle into a freshly dug hole, the third of 6 saplings destined to form a modest privacy screen along our property line. Diane held a clipboard, a potent symbol of suburban authority, and her eyes, the color of a winter sky, performed a swift and merciless inventory of our property. "A lovely addition," she said, her voice possessing the crisp finality of a closing file cabinet. She gestured toward the saplings with a perfectly manicured finger. The previous owners never did much with the landscaping. "We're hoping they'll add a bit of color in the spring," Amanda replied, her tone warm and non-committal. My wife, an FBI agent specializing in financial crimes, had a professional's gift for revealing nothing to the outside world, especially in our new civilian life. She was just Amanda Thompson, a consultant, a wife, a new neighbor. Diane's smile tightened by a millimeter. "I trust you've had a chance to review the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, specifically Section 8.4.2 regarding view corridors. It's a rather critical bylaw for maintaining the aesthetic harmony and property values of the estates." She paused, letting the implication settle. "Your sister, Lisa, found that section particularly challenging." A stillness settled in my chest, cold and heavy. The casual, almost surgical insertion of Lisa's name was no accident. It was a declaration. 3 years ago, in this very house, my sister-in-law, Lisa Rodriguez, had died. The official report, a document I wished I could unsee, had concluded it was a suicide, brought on by overwhelming stress. Amanda had never fully accepted it. Moving here was her way of seeking closure, of reclaiming a space haunted by grief and turning it into a sanctuary of peace. In one sentence, Diane Parker had informed us that peace was not on the agenda. "We've read the documents," Amanda said, her voice remaining perfectly level. A feat of control I had come to admire deeply. "Our trees are planted well within our private lot boundary and don't obstruct any designated common area views, as defined in the official plat map." Diane's eyebrows, 2 perfectly tweezed arches, rose a fraction. "The board's interpretation, which is the binding one, of course, relies on the Architectural Committee's view assessment map, not the county plat. A subtle but important distinction." She tapped her clipboard. "We find it's best to address these potential compliance issues early, before roots take hold, so to speak. It saves everyone a great deal of unpleasantness down the line." The subtext was as clear as a subpoena. "I know who you are. I know who lived here before you. I broke her. I can break you, too." She gave a final, dismissive glance at the half-planted tree, turned with a rustle of her cream-colored blazer, and walked away. The landscapers, who had stood frozen during the exchange, slowly resumed their work, their movements now hesitant and quiet. Amanda stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the spot where Diane had been. The warmth had drained from her face, replaced by the focused, analytical stillness I recognized from her work. She wasn't looking at a patch of grass. She was analyzing a threat vector. We had moved to Maple Grove Estates to escape a ghost. We had just learned the ghost had a name, a title, and a clipboard. The first week was a study in contrasts. By day, we unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and tried to stitch together the fabric of a normal life. We met a few neighbors, a young family with a toddler who waved shyly, a retired couple who offered us gardening tips, and an elderly woman named Eleanor Vance, who watched us from her porch with a look of profound sadness. But by night, our dining room table became a command center. The ghosts of the past were not content to remain in their boxes. Amanda, methodical and emotionally guarded since Lisa's death, was processing her grief the only way she knew how as an investigation. She had never believed the official story. Lisa, a dedicated and tenacious social worker, had been embroiled in a bitter dispute with the HOA just before her death. She had filed harassment complaints, documented everything, and told Amanda she was on the verge of uncovering something systematically corrupt. Then, silence. The case was closed, the narrative set in stone. Amanda's guilt that her professional skepticism hadn't been enough to save her own sister was a quiet, constant hum beneath the surface of our lives. My role was that of archivist and emotional ballast. I scanned the mountain of closing documents, organizing them into digital folders. I was the one who managed the paperwork, the logistics, the attempt to keep our lives anchored in the present, while Amanda's focus drifted inexorably toward the past. The language is intentionally vague, Amanda murmured on the third night, her finger tracing a line in the thick binder of CC&Rs. We were on Section 8, Landscaping and Architectural Control. She had highlighted Regr 8.4.2. No structure, planting, or other material shall be placed or permitted to remain upon any lot which may damage or interfere with any easement for the installation or maintenance of utilities, or which may unreasonably change, obstruct or retard direction or flow of any drainage channels, or which may be deemed by the board to materially obstruct a designated view corridor. Deemed by the board, she repeated, her voice tight. That's the weapon. It's subjective. It grants arbitrary power without a clear, objective standard. It's ripe for abuse. And the view assessment map she mentioned, I asked, pulling up the digital copies of our closing packet. Is it in here? We searched for an hour. It wasn't. There was the official county plat map, a detailed and legally binding survey showing property lines, utility easements, and public rights-of-way. Our lot. 847 was clearly delineated. There were no designated view corridors crossing it. She's bluffing, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. It's a scare tactic. The map probably doesn't even exist. Amanda didn't look relieved. No, she said slowly, her eyes distant. It's not a bluff. It's a test. She's establishing a procedural pretext. People like Diane don't bluff. They build a case file. Her words proved prophetic. That weekend, while organizing the garage, I found a worn cardboard box tucked away on a high shelf, missed by the previous owner's movers. It was filled with Lisa's old files. Most were related to her social work, but at the bottom was a thin manila folder labeled MGE HOA. Inside was a collection of violation notices, angry emails, and, most importantly, a folded property survey Lisa had commissioned a month before she died. It was a standard survey, but in the margin, next to our property line, was a handwritten note in Lisa's familiar script. The ink was slightly faded. A message from a ghost. Easement map doesn't match county record. HOA map is a fabrication. DP lying. My breath caught in my throat. DP. Diane Parker. Lisa had been down this exact same road. She had discovered the discrepancy, the lie at the heart of Diane's power. I looked at the note, at my sister-in-law's handwriting, and I understood. We weren't just planting trees. We were fighting my wife's sister's last battle. The email arrived on Tuesday, October 5th, at 9:14 a.m. The subject line was polite, professional, and utterly chilling. Courtesy notice, landscape compliance. 847 Maple Grove Circle. The sender was Maple Grove Estates Architectural Control Committee. But I knew it came from Diane. The language was a masterclass in bureaucratic intimidation, cloaked in the guise of helpfulness. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, welcome again to the community. In the interest of maintaining the aesthetic standards that make Maple Grove Estates a desirable place to live, we are writing to bring a potential compliance issue to your attention regarding the new saplings installed on your lot. As per CC&R, Figure 8.4.2 plantings must not obstruct designated view corridors. The 6'6" crepe myrtle saplings appear to be situated within the corridor, providing a view of the western hills from the common area greenbelt. This is a courtesy notice only. No violation has been recorded at this time. We ask that you please relocate the saplings to a more suitable location within 10 days to avoid a formal violation notice. A copy of the relevant view assessment map is attached for your reference. Sincerely, the MGE Architectural Control Committee. The attached file, MGE View Map 2019, Rev4.pdf, was a crude, unofficial-looking diagram. It showed the neighborhood layout, but overlaid with thick, dashed red lines labeled View Corridor. One of those lines cut directly across the back third of our property, our private, deeded lot. It was exactly what Lisa's note had suggested a fabrication. It bore no resemblance to the official, legally filed county plat map. Amanda read the email twice, her expression unreadable. Then she walked to the dining room table and laid Lisa's old survey next to my laptop, which displayed the official county map. The three documents told a story, the legal reality of the county record, the HOA's manufactured reality, and Lisa's discovery of the lie. She's running the exact same playbook on us, Amanda said, her voice a low murmur. She assumes we're like everyone else, that we'll see a formal-looking notice, a scary-looking map, and just comply out of fear and ignorance. My instinct was to be angry, to fire back an email calling out the blatant deception. But Amanda was already thinking several moves ahead. Her FBI training had conditioned her to see every interaction as a move in a longer game. A game won, not with emotion, but with evidence and procedure. We can't just accuse her of lying, she said, thinking aloud. That's what she wants. It makes us look emotional and aggressive. We have to respond calmly, politely, and create a paper trail that proves we are reasonable, and she is not. She spent the next hour composing her reply. It was a work of art, a perfect blend of neighborly politeness and firm, evidence-based rebuttal. Dear committee members, thank you for your email and for the warm welcome to Maple Grove. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. We have reviewed the attached map as well as the official county plat map and the property survey included with our closing documents. According to these legally filed records, there is no view corridor easement recorded on our lot. 847 Maple Grove Circle. The saplings are planted entirely on our private property and do not interfere with any recorded easements or common areas. For your reference, I have attached a copy of the official survey of our lot. We believe there may be a misunderstanding or an outdated map in use by the committee. We are, of course, happy to discuss this further to clear up any confusion. Best regards, Amanda Thompson. She attached the PDF of Lisa's old survey, the one with the handwritten note conveniently cropped out. She hit send and leaned back in her chair. The air in the room was thick with tension. The first shot had been fired, and we had returned it with precision. We were no longer just new homeowners. We were litigants in a Cold War, fighting over 6 small trees that now represented something much larger: truth, memory, and justice for Lisa. We had no idea how quickly that war was about to escalate. For a week, there was silence. A tense, watchful quiet that felt less like peace and more like the deep breath an army takes before a charge. Neighbors who had been friendly now offered tight, hurried smiles. We felt the subtle shift in the social atmosphere, the unseen currents of gossip and allegiance swirling around us. Diane was mobilizing. Then, on Tuesday, October 12th, the escalation arrived, not by the sterile immediacy of email, but with the deliberate, menacing weight of certified mail. The mail carrier handed me the green signature card, and I knew before I even saw the return address. I signed my name, my hand steady, and saw the tracking number printed across the top, 7218 1820 001 4402 1919. It was a number that would be seared into my memory, the first piece of hard evidence in the official record of our harassment. The envelope was thick, containing a multi-page document printed on heavy bond paper. At the top, in bold, red letters, were the words, "Formal Notice of Violation." Amanda's polite, evidence-based email had been utterly ignored. It was as if we had never sent it. The notice systematically laid out the offense, citing the same vague CC&R clause and the same fabricated map. But now, the friendly tone was gone, replaced by the cold, impersonal language of enforcement. Violation, CC&R, Re 8.4.2, obstruction of designated view corridor. Location, 847, Maple Grove Circle rear lot. Description, 6. 6 unapproved crepe myrtle saplings have been installed within the Western Hills view corridor, as delineated on the official MGE view assessment map. Cure period. You have 10 days from the date of this notice to cure the violation by removing the unapproved plantings. Consequences of non-compliance. Failure to cure the violation within the specified period will result in the commencement of a fine schedule, beginning at $100 per day, as authorized by the association's bylaws. Article 5, Section 3. The stakes had been raised. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a formal accusation with financial penalties attached. Tucked behind the main notice was a second document, Notice of Right to a Hearing. It informed us that we had the right to contest the violation at a formal hearing before the Board of Directors. To do so, we had to submit a written dispute within 5 days. "They're boxing us in," I said, the pages trembling slightly in my hand. "They ignored our evidence and are forcing us into their process, on their turf." Amanda took the documents from me, her face a mask of calm calculation. "This is exactly what I expected," she said. "This is the due process trap. They follow the procedural steps to the letter, which gives their actions the veneer of legality. It's designed to make the homeowner feel powerless, to make them believe the fight is unwinnable, because the process itself is the weapon." She wasn't angry. She was energized. This was her world. Financial criminals operated the same way, using complex legal structures and regulatory loopholes to bleed their victims dry. Diane Parker was just running a micro version of a white-collar crime syndicate. "She's made a critical error," Amanda continued, tapping the notice. "She believes her process is impenetrable, but all processes have rules, and rules can be used against those who wrote them, by ignoring our initial evidence, the official survey, and escalating. She has documented her own unreasonable behavior. She's officially on record choosing to enforce a rule based on a fabricated document over a legally filed one." That evening, Amanda drafted our formal dispute letter. It was even more precise than her email, a document crafted to be read aloud in a hearing or a courtroom. To the Maple Grove Estates Board of Directors. This letter serves as our formal dispute of the violation notice dated October 12, 2021, tracking Yasha 70118, 1820, 001 4402, 1919. We contest the allegation that the plantings on our property, 847 Maple Grove Circle, are in violation of CC&R Favor 8.4.2. As stated in our previous correspondence of October 5th, the plantings are located entirely on our private, deeded property. The official, legally recorded plat map for our subdivision, on file with Somerset County, shows no view corridor easement on our lot. The association's view assessment map is an unofficial document that appears to contradict the legal property records and cannot be the basis for a violation or fine. We formally request a hearing before the board to present our evidence, which includes certified copies of the county plat map and our property deed. Sincerely, Amanda and Ben Thompson. We sent it via certified mail the next morning, creating our own corresponding paper trail. 2 days later, on October 17th, the reply came, a notice of hearing. We were scheduled to appear before the Board of Directors at their next monthly meeting on November 1st at 7:00 p.m. in the community clubhouse. The notice stated we would be allotted 5 minutes on the agenda to state our case. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to defend our property, to fight for Lisa's memory, against a system designed to crush dissent. The countdown had begun. We had 14 days to prepare for a battle that felt less and less about trees with every passing hour. The 2 weeks leading up to the hearing were a blur of methodical, relentless investigation. Amanda shifted into full FBI mode, transforming our quiet suburban home into a staging ground for a complex counter-operation. Our dining table disappeared under a sea of documents maps, bylaws, property records, and printouts of state statutes governing homeowners associations. Our first stop was the Somerset County Recorder's Office, a sterile, quiet building downtown that smelled of old paper and bureaucratic efficiency. We requested the official Mylar plat map for the Maple Grove Estate subdivision. A clerk brought out a massive, rolled sheet of translucent plastic, covered in the precise, spidery lines of surveyors and civil engineers. We spent an hour poring over it, confirming what we already knew: the map, signed and sealed by the county in 1998 when the subdivision was approved, was the ultimate legal authority. It showed property boundaries, utility easements, and designated common areas with unimpeachable clarity. There was no mention, no marking, no hint of a view corridor easement anywhere on our lot or, for that matter, on any private lot in the entire neighborhood. We paid for 3 certified, notarized copies. This was Exhibit A. Next, Amanda invoked our rights under state law, which guaranteed homeowners access to association records. She sent a formal, written request to the HOA's management company for the unredacted board meeting minutes from the past 5 years, all contracts with vendors, and the complete financial statements. It was a broad request, designed to be overwhelming, a classic investigative tactic to see where the resistance was strongest. The response, which came a week later, was telling. We received the financial statements, which at first glance seemed clean. We received a list of vendors. But the meeting minutes were a different story. They were heavily, almost absurdly, redacted. Entire pages were blacked out. Specifically, every single vote related to architectural variances, land use, and legal disputes was completely obscured. It was a blatant attempt to conceal the board's decision-making process. The redactions were a confession in black ink. "They're hiding something," Amanda said, holding a redacted page up to the light as if she could pierce the black ink with sheer willpower. "These aren't just discussions about what color to paint the clubhouse. These are the decisions that affect property rights. And they're hiding every single one." While the paper trail grew, I took on the role of field operative. My mission was to talk to the neighbors, to gauge the community's temperature, and gather anecdotal intelligence. The whispers confirmed our fears. Diane Parker ruled Maple Grove Estates through a campaign of selective enforcement and intimidation. I spoke with the retired couple down the street, the Hendersons. Mr. Henderson, a frail man with a tremor in his hands, told me about the $2,000 fine he'd received because his trash cans were visible from the street for 3 hours after the morning pickup. He had been at a doctor's appointment. The young family with the toddler told me about the violation they got for a colorful plastic playhouse in their backyard. Deemed not in harmony with the community's aesthetic, they took it down immediately, too scared of the fines to fight. But the most important conversation I had was with Eleanor Vance, the elderly woman who had watched us with such sad eyes on our first day. She had lived in the neighborhood since it was built, and was Lisa's only real friend here. I found her tending her rose bushes, her movement slow and deliberate. "You're fighting her," she said. Not as a question, but as a statement. She didn't need to say Diane's name. Lisa fought her, too, right up to the end. Eleanor's voice was soft, laced with a grief that was still fresh. Diane targets people. Anyone who asks too many questions. Anyone who stands up to her. After Lisa filed those complaints, things got ugly. Diane turned the whole neighborhood against her. Told people Lisa was unstable, that she was trying to destroy our property values. It was a smear campaign. People I've known for 20 years crossed the street to avoid her. She paused, snipping a dead bloom from a bush. She isolates her victims, makes them feel like they're the crazy one. That's her real weapon, not the bylaws. Fear. Eleanor's story painted a chilling picture of a community held hostage. The bylaws were merely the pretext. The true currency of Diane's power was the social and psychological pressure she expertly applied. Lisa hadn't just been fighting a legal battle. She had been fighting for her reputation, her sanity, in a community that had been poisoned against her. We now had the legal evidence, the procedural paper trail, and the human context. We understood the what, the how, and the why. The picture was almost complete. We just needed the one final piece of evidence that would tie it all together and prove that this wasn't just about power, but something far more tangible. To make our case airtight for the hearing, Amanda insisted we hire our own professional. Lisa's survey is a good starting point, but it's 3 years old. She argued, we need a new one, certified, dated, and conducted by a licensed surveyor who can testify if needed. We need irrefutable, current evidence. She found Mr. Evans, a semi-retired land surveyor with a reputation for being meticulous and incorruptible. He was a quiet, deliberate man in his late 60s, with hands calloused from decades of work and eyes that seemed to assess the world in degrees and elevations. He arrived on a crisp Thursday morning, his truck filled with tripods, electronic measuring devices, and rolls of plans. He spent 4 hours on our property, his movements economical and precise. He drove temporary stakes, sighted lines through his theodolite, and made careful notes on a waterproof pad. Amanda and I watched from the kitchen window, a strange sense of hope building within us. He was a man of facts, of hard lines and legal boundaries. He was the perfect antidote to Diane Parker's world of subjective interpretations and manufactured realities. Around noon, as he was packing up his equipment, Diane Parker's pristine white SUV glided to a stop at the curb. She got out, clipboard in hand, her expression a mask of controlled fury. The predator had spotted an intruder in her territory. "May I help you?" she called out, her voice sharp. "This is a private community. Unscheduled commercial work requires a permit from the association. Mr. Evans, unfazed, wiped his hands on a rag. Ma'am, I'm a state-licensed surveyor, hired by the property owners to conduct a legal boundary survey of their private lot. I'm not performing any work that requires an HOA permit. Your equipment is on the common area sidewalk, Diane countered, pointing a finger. That is association property. You are trespassing. Mr. Evans gave a weary sigh, the sigh of a man who had dealt with this brand of pettiness 1,000 times. Ma'am, the sidewalk is a public right-of-way easement, as clearly defined on the county plat map. I am legally entitled to be here. It was at that moment that the police cruiser arrived. Diane, having seen Mr. Evans's truck earlier, had clearly called them, reporting a trespasser, a single officer, a young man with a calm and professional demeanor, stepped out of his car. Diane immediately launched into her performance, playing the role of the concerned community leader, protecting her residents from an unauthorized intruder. The officer listened patiently, his gaze shifting from Diane to Mr. Evans, to the surveying equipment, and finally to our house, where Amanda and I now stood on the porch. The officer addressed Mr. Evans. Sir, can you tell me what you're doing here? Officer, my name is George Evans. I'm a licensed land surveyor. I was retained by the Thompsons at 847 Maple Grove to perform a survey of their property line. And you are the officer, asked Diane. I am Diane Parker, the president of the Homeowners Association, she said, her voice dripping with self-importance. This man is trespassing on our common areas and conducting unpermitted work. The officer nodded slowly. Ma'am, a property survey is a legal matter, not a construction project, and the sidewalk is a public right-of-way. This appears to be a civil dispute over property lines. It is not a police matter. He then turned to Mr. Evans. Are you finished with your work? Sir. Just about, Mr. Evans said. Then, I'd suggest you pack up and be on your way. Ma'am, he said, turning back to Diane, if you believe there's a legal issue, you'll need to contact an attorney. We can't intervene in a civil disagreement. The officer's calm, procedural dismissal of her authority was a public humiliation. He had correctly identified her attempt to use law enforcement as her personal army and had flatly refused. She stood there, speechless, her face flushed with anger. The officer got back in his car and drove away. The interaction, lasting no more than 3 minutes, had perfectly illustrated the limits of her power. She wasn't the law. She was just a bully with a binder. Later that afternoon, Mr. Evans delivered the new survey. It was beautiful in its precision, a work of factual art. It confirmed everything. Our trees were a good 15 feet inside our property line. And more importantly, the official legal description of our lot contained no mention of any view easement. As he was leaving, he handed Amanda a separate file. While I was pulling the records for your subdivision, I noticed something you might find interesting, he said, his professional curiosity having gotten the better of him. I've done a lot of work in this area over the years. About 4 years ago, a developer, a company called Viridian Properties LLC, started buying up homes in this neighborhood. At first, it was just 1 or 2. Now they own nearly a dozen. He opened the file. It was a list of property transactions. The interesting part, he continued, pointing to a column of data, is the purchase price. In almost every case, they bought the properties for 15 to 20% below market value. And most of the sales were from owners who seemed to be in a hurry to get out. Distressed sales, we call them. Amanda's eyes scanned the list of addresses. Her breath hitched. She recognized two of them from Eleanor Story's families who had been targeted and harassed by Diane, until they finally gave up and sold. My firm did some initial site planning for Viridian a few years back. Mr. Evans added offhandedly. They were looking at a long-term plan to acquire enough contiguous lots to petition the county for a zoning change. Wanted to build high-density townhomes. He shrugged. Nothing came of it, but they were definitely aggressive. He left, and Amanda and I stared at the list of transactions. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't about power. It wasn't about aesthetics or property values in the way Diane claimed. It was about money. Cold, hard, predatory cash. Diane wasn't just a bully. She was a foot soldier in a campaign of economic warfare. Her harassment campaigns, the fines, the endless violations, they weren't random acts of a petty tyrant. They were tactical maneuvers designed to wear people down, to make their lives so miserable they would sell their homes at a discount to a developer who was waiting in the wings. Lisa hadn't stumbled onto a case of HOA overreach. She had stumbled onto a criminal conspiracy, and it had gotten her killed. The discovery of the Viridian Properties connection changed everything. We were no longer just defending against a violation notice. We were sitting on evidence of a potential criminal enterprise. The hearing on November 1st was no longer just a hearing. It was the opening salvo in a much larger war. But Diane was a formidable opponent, and she had one more card to play. She was not just reactive, she was proactive, realizing she couldn't win the property line dispute on its merits, especially with a professional surveyor involved. She changed the battlefield. She decided to attack the investigator. On Monday, October 25th, 6 days before the hearing, Amanda received an automated email notification from her supervisor at the FBI. It was a cold, impersonal message that landed like a punch to the gut. Subject: notification of administrative action. Agent Rodriguez, you are hereby placed on administrative leave with pay, effective immediately, pending the outcome of an Office of Professional Responsibility (OPR) inquiry. Please surrender your badge, service weapon, and all bureau credentials to the field office security desk by 1700 hours today. Amanda stared at the screen, her face pale. An OPR complaint is the third rail of a federal agent's career. It meant someone had filed a formal, detailed accusation of misconduct, even if the claims were baseless. The investigation itself was a black mark, a career-stalling, soul-crushing process. Attached was a summary of the complaint. It was anonymous, but the language had Diane's fingerprints all over it. It was a work of malicious genius, twisting every fact of our situation into a narrative of federal overreach and abuse of power. It accused Amanda of using her position as an FBI agent to intimidate a civilian homeowners association, of leveraging federal resources, her knowledge and training in a private civil dispute, and of conducting an unauthorized investigation into the HOA's leadership for personal reasons related to her deceased sister. It even mentioned my conversations with neighbors as evidence of a coordinated witness intimidation campaign. She found out, Amanda whispered, the color draining from her face, through a simple public record search or a well-connected source. Diane had confirmed Amanda's profession and her maiden name, and she had weaponized it with devastating precision. The complaint was perfectly crafted to trigger an automatic, non-discretionary OPR investigation by placing Amanda on administrative leave. It achieved 3 of Diane's strategic goals in a single blow. First, it damaged Amanda's professional credibility just days before the hearing. Second, it cut her off from all FBI resources databases, colleagues, and the institutional authority of her badge. Third, and most insidiously, it was a psychological attack designed to put her on the defensive, to make her second-guess her every move, to exhaust her emotionally just when she needed to be at her sharpest. The strain on us was immense. The fight, which had been external, was now internal as well. The stress began to fray the edges of our marriage. I found myself becoming the voice of caution, terrified that Amanda's single-minded pursuit of justice for Lisa would end up destroying her career and our future. "Maybe we should just move the trees," I said one night, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Just for now. Comply. Let the OPR thing die down. And then we can re-engage when you're cleared." "No," Amanda said, her voice hard. "That's exactly what she wants. If we give in, she wins. She proves she can break anyone. This is bigger than the trees now. It was always bigger than the trees." The OPR complaint was the ultimate obstacle. Amanda was isolated. Her greatest strength, her identity as a federal agent, turned into her greatest liability. She was a warrior without a sword, a week away from a battle for which she now felt profoundly unprepared. The hearing on November 1st would not just be about a property violation. It would be a trial of her character, her professionalism, and her future. Held in a community clubhouse in front of an audience of neighbors Diane had systematically turned against us. The stakes had been raised to their absolute peak. The community clubhouse buzzed with the low murmur of anticipation. Nearly 30 residents had turned out for the monthly board meeting, an unusually large crowd. They weren't here for the treasurer's report or the update on pool maintenance. They were here for the spectacle. Diane Parker, seated at the center of the long table at the front of the room, had made sure of it. For weeks, she had been seeding the narrative: the rogue FBI agent, the aggressive new homeowners, the threat to their peaceful community. We were the evening's entertainment. At the head of the table sat the 5 board members. Diane, as president, was flanked by a timid-looking treasurer, a stern-faced secretary, and 2 other members at large who looked deeply uncomfortable. In front of Diane, a small digital kitchen timer was set to 5:00. Amanda and I sat in the front row. On her lap was a single, slim binder, its contents methodically organized. She was calm, but it was the calm of a coiled spring. Her career was in jeopardy. Her sister's memory was on the line, and she had been given 5 minutes to make her case. "Next on the agenda," Diane announced, her voice resonating with authority, "is the violation appeal for 847 Maple Grove Circle." She gestured towards Amanda. "You have 5 minutes." She pressed the button on the timer. The green numbers began to descend: 4:59, 4:58. Amanda walked to the small lectern facing the board. She didn't look at the residents. She looked directly at the board members, making eye contact with each one. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady and clear. "My name is Amanda Thompson. My husband and I are here to appeal the violation notice we received regarding 6 trees on our property." The timer read 4:45. "Let's be very clear about the facts." She opened her binder. "First, here is the formal violation notice we received." She placed a copy on the lectern. "It alleges an obstruction of a designated view corridor, based on CC&R Section 8.4.2, 420. Second, here is Section 8.4.2. She displayed an enlarged copy. It gives the board the power to act on obstructions deemed to interfere with such a corridor. The key word is deemed, as it implies a discretionary judgment. 405. Third, here is the basis for that judgment: the view assessment map, provided to us by the committee. She held up the HOA's crude, unofficial map with the red line drawn across our property. It is an undated, unsigned, and uncertified document with no apparent legal standing. 340. The room was silent. Amanda's methodical, Evidence-based presentation was not the emotional outburst many had expected. She was building a case, brick by brick. Which brings me to my fourth and final point. Her voice dropped slightly. Drawing everyone in. This is the official, notarized, and legally binding subdivision plat map for Maple Grove Estates, on file with Somerset County. She unfolded one of the large, certified copies from the recorder's office and held it up. It was imposing, official, undeniable. "This document," she said, her voice ringing with clarity, "is the sole legal authority defining the boundaries, easements, and common areas in our community. Please, show me where it indicates a view corridor easement on my private property. Show me where it grants the association the right to regulate views from a common area across a private lot." 305. She laid the map on the table in front of the board. The contrast between the official, complex plat map and the HOA's childishly simple diagram was devastating. Diane's face was a stony mask. The association has knowingly and repeatedly attempted to enforce a rule based on a fabricated map, while ignoring the legally filed records we provided from the very beginning. This is not an enforcement action, it is harassment. 240. She had them. She had proven her case on the merits. But she wasn't finished. Now came the masterstroke. This brings up a larger question of transparency. Amanda continued, turning to the binder once more. Under state law, we requested the board meeting minutes for the past 5 years. She held up the stack of heavily redacted pages. This is what we received. Every substantive vote on variances, disputes, and land use is blacked out. The residents of this community have a right to know what is being decided in their name. 210. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the audience, and she saw him, Mr. Henderson, the frail, elderly neighbor who'd been fined for his trash cans. He was sitting next to Eleanor Vance, looking confused and frightened, clearly having been pressured to attend. In that instant, Amanda remembered what Eleanor had told her in confidence. Just a day earlier, Diane had coerced a terrified Mr. Henderson into voting by proxy for a crucial land use variance a year ago, in exchange for forgiving thousands of dollars in trumped-up fines. Exposing that specific vote would be a kill shot, proving Diane's corruption, but it would also humiliate and potentially implicate this innocent, fragile man in front of all his neighbors. This was the secondary moral twist, the test of character Eleanor had subtly presented her with. Amanda had a choice: total victory through vengeance, or a principled victory that protected the vulnerable. I saw the flash of conflict in her eyes, a split-second decision playing out. She made her choice. Instead of naming Mr. Henderson, she pivoted. She looked directly at the board treasurer, the timid man at the end of the table. "For example," she said, her voice sharp as a diamond, "what is the board hiding in the minutes from the meeting of May 12th of last year, the same week? I understand that my sister Lisa Rodriguez's final harassment complaint was dismissed by this board. What land use variance was approved in that secret vote? And what is the board hiding about its relationship with the developer, Viridian Properties, which has been systematically buying homes from residents after they've been targeted by this board 115? Gasps rippled through the room. The treasurer went pale. Diane's composure finally cracked. A flicker of pure panic crossed her face. Amanda had just exposed the pattern of corruption without sacrificing a single pawn. She had shown that this wasn't just about her, or Lisa. It was about all of them. The kitchen timer beeped, its shrill sound signaling the end of her 5 minutes. Amanda stood silent, letting her questions hang in the air, more powerful than any accusation. The beep of the timer seemed to break a spell. For a moment, There was stunned silence. Then, the room erupted, not in anger at us, but in a confused, rising clamor directed at the board. People were turning to their neighbors, whispering, questioning. Before Diane could regain control, a man in the back of the room stood up. It was one of the newer residents, an accountant I'd met briefly. I'd like to make a motion, he said, his voice hesitant but clear. I move that the board commission an immediate, independent, third-party audit of all land deals, architectural variances, and financial records for the past 5 years. Second, another voice called out instantly. Diane, her face ashen, tried to intervene. That motion is out of order. It is not on the agenda. According to the bylaws, the accountant cut her off, holding up his own copy of the rulebook. Any homeowner can move for a vote from the floor during new business. And this certainly qualifies as new business. We have heard serious allegations of financial misconduct and a lack of transparency. We have a right to investigate. The authority in the room had shifted. It no longer belonged to Diane. It had returned to the residents. A vote was called. It was an overwhelming chorus of ayes. The motion passed. Diane Parker, who had wielded the bylaws like a weapon for years, had just been defeated by them. Her power, built on secrecy and fear, had crumbled under the bright light of public scrutiny. Another resident immediately moved to dismiss our violation notice. It was passed unanimously. Even Diane, trapped and exposed, had to vote in favor. The meeting descended into chaos. The board members were bombarded with questions they couldn't answer. Amanda and I slipped out of the clubhouse and into the cool night air. We had won. Not with a shout, but with a binder. Not through intimidation, but through information. In the parking lot, several neighbors approached us. The first was Eleanor Vance. She simply took Amanda's hand and squeezed it. Lisa would be so proud, she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. You did it the right way. Mr. Henderson came next, his wife on his arm. He looked at Amanda, his expression full of a gratitude so profound, it needed no words. He knew what she had done, and what she had chosen not to do. Others followed, apologizing for their silence, for believing the narrative Diane had spun. They shared their own stories of petty fines, of intimidation, of feeling powerless. It was a floodgate opening, a community starting the slow, painful process of healing and taking back its own power. We hadn't just saved ourselves. We had liberated the entire neighborhood. Amanda had not only cleared her own name, but she had also, finally, cleared her sister's. The independent audit was a bloodbath. It revealed everything Amanda had suspected, and more. Diane Parker had been receiving substantial kickbacks from Viridian Properties for every home they acquired following an HOA-driven dispute. She had manufactured violations to create distressed sellers, effectively functioning as the developer's acquisitions agent. The redacted minutes concealed a series of variances she had pushed through to make the acquired lots more attractive for future high-density development. The corruption was systematic, lucrative, and deeply criminal. Diane was removed from the board in disgrace, faced with the audit's findings. Several residents, emboldened by Amanda's stand, filed a formal police report. The district attorney's office launched a criminal investigation for fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Amanda's OPR investigation was closed. The live-streamed police incident, the testimony from Officer Brennan, and the flood of support from her neighbors, who now understood the context of her harassment, resulted in a full exoneration. She was commended for her restraint under extreme provocation. With her name cleared, she established a new, community-led transparency committee in Maple Grove. dedicated to ensuring the board's actions were always open and accountable. Our lives found a new, quiet rhythm. The crepe myrtles thrived, their leaves turning a vibrant crimson in the late autumn sun. The house, once a place of grief, began to feel like a home, a true sanctuary. The final surprise came on a rainy Saturday afternoon. We were cleaning out the last of Lisa's boxes from the garage. At the bottom of a box of old college textbooks, Amanda found a small, unassuming desk organizer. As she picked it up, she felt something taped to the underside of a drawer. It was a flash drive. Her hands trembled as she plugged it into her laptop. It contained a single folder labeled Insurance. Inside were dozens of files, duplicates of all the documents Lisa had stored in the safety deposit box. A detailed log of every interaction she'd had with Diane, and a complete financial trace of the kickback scheme that was even more detailed than the auditor's report. Lisa, the methodical investigator, had backed up everything. The last file was an audio recording, named D.P. Miller Final MP3 YOW. Amanda clicked play. We heard Lisa's voice, faint but clear, followed by the unmistakable voices of Diane Parker and a man Lisa's notes identified as a detective who had dismissed her claims. It was a recording of a phone call Lisa had captured, a conversation that provided the final, irrefutable evidence for the prosecution. It was the sound of conspirators believing they were safe, discussing how to handle the unstable social worker who was getting too close. It was Lisa's last gift, her final, posthumous testimony. Amanda closed the laptop, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of peace. Justice had been done. Her sister's work was finished,